Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me? How you doing, Citra?
Yeah.
What's up?
Well, I think if you if you go about it from the left, liberals are like hated, not really hated, but like disregarded, because basically what they think is good and what they actually support are two different things. Like if
Okay.
you think about liberal thought, for example, like liberties, we are all equal, and stuff like this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, capitalism isn't really the best system or the system that holds those values.
Okay.
That's what in leftist places are, say, liberals are made fun of because they believe all the right stuff theoretically, but they end up supporting the bad guys for
Okay.
those.
Is- Who's the bad guys in this?
Well, for example, a lot of liberals tend to support America pretty much.
Yeah.
Like, for example, one of the biggest liberals YouTubers, Destiny, supporting the supporting Israel. It's a
Okay.
really big contradiction.
Okay. So, I
And
mean, like, I look at like supporting Israel as equivalent to like understanding the necessity of like having like relations with other countries. Like, you understand that they are a political. What the fuck was that fucking lock anyway? You understand that like we want to be able to have a foothold in the Middle East, right?
yeah,
Like the United States has a vested interest in being in the Middle East.
why choosing the ones that are being in apartheid and are literally hated by everybody else?
Well, it wasn't like that to begin with, but I mean to put it into perspective, there were like, people that they just were not really compatible with the United States at all in terms of like an idealism, whereas like Israel is not. And they've been consistently an ally to the United States for decades to come. So I guess my question is like, okay, well, let's say that your ally is now like harming people. I agree. I think you should condemn those, which the United States, by the way, is. They have been multiple times threatening, saying like, hey, we will not support you if you make this action, that action. And Biden overall has been telling Netanyahu, all of the horrible things that they're doing, while at the same time sending funding. I'll give you that. I guess like my problem is like, how would you handle this? I guess.
No, one, I wouldn't like I would like to talk about Israel Palestine, but I think that like we were talking about singular liberals supporting the United States. Obviously, I understand why the United States wants to support Israel, but I wasn't talking about states. I was talking about peoples.
Okay. Well, one example is I live in the United States, and so the United States would do better off furthering its own geopolitical interests. So that benefits me directly.
Well,
I benefit when that happens.
let's say that your ally, even if let's say since they are your ally, you benefit from helping them. Let's say that having those allies makes you, let's say, in geopolitics weaker actually, because let's say your ally is making a really bad decision and making more enemies by supporting that. Maybe I don't know. Some countries in Europe wants to go back, wants to make trade to with other countries now
Okay.
or stuff like that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't.
This is
That
not
makes
happening
sense.
right now, but like this is the thought that
Do you, which
people
one do you
think.
think like is a good chance of, let's say, I mean, you're talking about, them supporting other currencies. That's why I'm bringing this up. Like, do you think that like BRICS will be a good contender against the US dollar?
I really don't know. I don't think they are united, and I don't think they can do much. And I think they are just another like if you like it's just another if we were in another if we were in let's say a sport, they are just let's say they have a different color on their uniform. There is not really much of a difference. There is no fundamental difference in what they do, so it will be just supporting another squad, not any meaningful difference.
Okay. So I guess like I mean you understand my perspective. So what's your issue, would you say?
I mean, like mostly I don't understand why if let's say take the birth of liberalism and let's say French Revolution. All the values that were let's say that were strong in those days. Well, capitalism really didn't let's say make them up for it. Like, okay, now we don't have the nobles anymore. We are equals on paper, but not much else.
Okay.
I'm not
Are
trying
you saying
to
that everybody should be
downplay it, but yeah, for example, having like most people don't have much more, let's say, power to their government than or their, let's say, especially their economy or their economic leaders, economic figures, than the peasants in under a king.
okay? I
It's
mean,
more accountable, but we didn't make
what?
that
So
much
like,
of.
how would you make that go? Like the problem of scarcity go away? I guess like because like one way or another there will always be haves and have-nots. I feel. Is that? Do you think that that's an incorrect assumption to say that there will always be haves and have-nots? Or
No, I actually don't think so.
okay,
Like, I think that democracy, while having some downturns, it's much more than a 50-50. I think that's 95-5 for democracy.
well, I mean, we've had pure democracies in the past, and one thing that happens under a pure democracy is 51% take away the rights of the 49. So, like, democracy alone isn't going to get rid of inequality. In fact, it makes things more unequal.
Like, if we don't find another system in the future, democracy is the most equal one. For most of the history of the world, it's always been 1% that rules under the 99%, and that rules the 99%. Then we made the advancement. We made maybe now it's 10%. It's never been 51% before. Like this is as
Well, no, I'm saying, like, in theory, 51% can take away the rights of 49% because they are the majority, right? Like, would you say, let me ask you, would you say, like, Sharia law is a just system?
no.
Okay, but if you're in a Muslim country that is majority Muslims, and they want Sharia law, and then they democratically make Sharia law a thing, would you find that to be a just system?
Of course not. I don't
Right?
find
Yeah, because it's
any.
because democracy ultimately is where 51% can take away the rights of the 49%. Don't get me wrong, I'm not against democracy in principle, but I'm aware that pure democracies themselves cause this problem.
Do you mean without a constitution?
Well, I mean, specifically in the United States, not only do we have several checks and balances to prevent this. Number one, we have a constitution. Number two, we have a Supreme Court. Number three, we have a Congress and a Senate that have their own elected representatives. And really, like at the end of the day, you're not like voting for individual laws. You're actually voting for a representative to represent you in the laws that they pass. Right. And so there's a lot of limitations to being able to, like, let's say, somebody example, they argued against me. They said, well, what if there was enough Muslims in the United States where they argue for Sharia law? And I said, that's physically impossible, even if they were the majority. And they didn't understand that because we have a separation of power. So, okay,
Yeah, but,
I'm saying that like democracy doesn't lead to equality like what you're saying. Does that seem fair?
no, because this is the like to have like I'm not arguing that it's let's say it's without flaws. I'm arguing that it's the best solution that we ever found.
No,
Like
we
there
have a
is
better
no
solution.
other method that it's better,
We have a better solution.
which is
It's capitalism with social safety nets.
what?
Capitalism with social safety nets and liberal democracy.
Wait, 1 second. Representative democracy, which basically, if the constitution allows it, can make pretty damn bad laws, very unpopular laws, as long as as long as the government has the Senate, and the people can do nothing about it until they are done. There's nothing they can do except taking over the government. Doesn't seem like a very fair system.
I mean, like, I would probably agree with you in the sense, like, we should pull money out of like the local representatives. Like, I think like insider trading is a really big problem. It vastly changes the way that their voting works. They're not necessarily in favor of the constituents, but rather in favor of their own pockets. There's an argument to be made about PACs and super PACs, but I guess like what I'm trying to point out is like that just says, hey, we should just pull money out of politics and not like, hey, let's get rid of the constitutional a constitutional republic.
I don't want to get rid of the constitutional republic.
Oh, okay. I
I
thought
feel a
earlier
strong-
you were talking about you wanted a more pure democracy. You said that it wasn't
No, just democracy.
Okay, well,
I'm talking
so
about just
but
a
we have
democracy.
democracy,
I'm
right?
saying that well, it is it can be done very better than, for example, the United States.
Okay, so what would you
One,
argue?
Let's say first, well, the polling is done wrong. The
polling is done
former
wrong?
President Trump won the election without the majority of the vote. For example, the
Oh, you're
electoral
talking about the
college.
electoral college.
Yeah, that. As
So
for
there. All right, go ahead. I'll let you. Sorry.
no, let's make this point by point. It's better.
Okay, so if we look at the electoral college, there is a point to be made in the sense that one, it prevents there from being corruption in an election because, like, at that point, you don't just have to influence one district; you have to influence many districts. There is also the fact that it ends up with a clear winner, in the sense that it's 270 to win. I guess those are like some pretty clear benefits, but I can see why somebody could see it as a negative. I don't necessarily see it as a negative. I see it as, okay, maybe, there's some positives, maybe there's some negatives there. Does that make sense?
There is only a negative here, which is it doesn't it's not democracy. Like that's if the minority can elect the president, which means winning, that is a very that is an obvious flaw for a democracy, which is fine if you don't like democracies, but as you seem to do, well, that is clearly not democratic.
I mean, I guess maybe to some instance, but again, like you yourself, we both agreed that we don't necessarily want a pure democracy.
Well, I don't like what you think is a pure democracy. For me, a pure democracy means it is pretty idealistic of me, but a pure democracy would be a democracy with, let's say, with not representative. So as long as it's possible, because if we look at the United States, it's not possible to have every decision made by everyone or by the people involved. But that will be the end goal. By not having a representative, why would
Okay,
we
so
have a
then who's to
representative?
say that we couldn't potentially have Sharia law then?
I like the constitution. Like, I don't believe that a pure democracy is a democracy without the constitution. That's like, for me, it's the opposite. If you don't have a constitution, you're not a pure democracy. I believe that
I'm confused.
50%,
Is a
like,
constitution dependent on people's votes, or is it circumventional?
I believe that the constitution can be changed by the 51%. Yeah,
So then that would mean that the constitution doesn't mean a whole lot, I guess.
it does mean a lot because for it to pass, there needs to be a specific law that is only about that. There is no string attached. Just one. You want to change this thing about the constitution? Yes or no?
I mean, we
It's
already
not
have that,
complicated.
right? But because like we have we have elected representatives, this isn't as easy as you would assume. There's also has to be like a huge majority to add amendments to the Constitution.
There is no referendum in the United States.
What? Yeah, there is.
No,
Why do
I
you
was
think they're
asking,
called
like,
amendments?
yeah, then is it 51% or is it more?
It's a lot more. Yeah. I think it's like over 70%. I have to look it up exactly, but there's some very specific rules, but it is designed to be amended.
Yeah, but if the 70%, if it requires the 70%, it's very difficult to change.
Yeah. That's by intent. It should be
Yeah,
difficult to change. Yeah, Real AG
yeah.
says 2/3 of the states. I mean, I can pull up the exact. 'Cause I don't have it memorized. I mean, but it's a very high criteria,
The thing is,
which I'm not against.
we
I think
can
that's a good thing to have
we
a
can
high
be
criteria.
fortunate. We can be fortunate and have a good constitution that we don't want to change. But the let's say thought process shouldn't be, okay, let's make the constitution difficult to change, so that even if the majority disagrees with what the constitution says, it still cannot be changed by democratic means. I think for me it's much better to have a constitution that is not easily, but like 55%, I think it's a good number. People want to change it. I think they
Okay.
should. And if things go badly, now they see the results.
Well,
Like
I've
having
seen countries.
having 55% of the population hate something about the constitution, one makes people want to, like, makes people distrust in democracy. Like, how is that the majority of people disagrees on something and we can change it through democratic means? That's one way to make authoritarians more popular. Like,
Let
see,
me ask
democracy
you
is
this: would you say that a consistent government is a government that people trust more? Or maybe they like it more. Maybe not trust more is the word, but like more.
Can you rephrase the question?
Do you think that a consistent government results in people like enjoying their government more? Like, is consistency important?
Consistent.
Yeah.
I don't think people should really like their government. I think people should like what the action of the government are. Like I not liking the government just because it's the government. I think they should like it when when the government does good things, and they shouldn't like it when
I'm not saying like the
they do
government
bad.
doing good or bad things. I'm saying that it's consistent. Do you think that people
Okay,
desire
so
a consistent government?
consistent.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't like it.
Why?
I really prefer a government that changes and adapts to the situations.
Okay, sure. But do you think that there's like some core rules that you think probably should not be easy to change? Like, or do you just think that like,
No, I
you know,
think that if 50 or whatever it means, it needs to change the constitution. Like let's say 55% of people disagree, like want to change the constitution. Something that let's say a thing of the constitution that I like, I think I've already lost. Why is 55% of the population disagreeing with something that I find extremely good? Like this is not like this is a democratic loss, and I should take that. I should the constitution will be changed, and let's say if I believe something, maybe I was wrong. Maybe the change that they made material progress, made society better, or if it didn't, well, I just need 55% of the of the population to change it back.
I think that like the only way that I would want such consistent rules to change like that are, well, first of all, I would need to know like, hey, why do we have these rules to begin with, right? And if it has like a pragmatic sense, and at the same time, like we don't have instances where it appears to be better, I'm perfectly okay with staying in that direction, because I think like the current quality of living standard that we have in the United States is like it's gargantuanly high. Don't get me wrong, right? The United States has its own problems, but I also think that like I don't think that like countries could potentially continue going up. I think it's like totally possible that the exact opposite happen. And I think like by making like sudden and radical changes, you know, there's like an assumption that if we make radical changes, all of a sudden things will be better. But I mean, let's be honest, right? We've never lived higher quality of living standards than we do today. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that, but that is just because science keeps going on. Like there is technological advance, and we live for most of the parts in a more equal society than, at least by laws, than we were by rights. I mean, than we were 100 or 200 years ago. But to think that we live in the, let's say, best, or that it's really dangerous to try to have more, I think that's a bit nihilistic by you.
Well, do you think if that we made a giant change, do you think it's possible that things could get much worse? Not like a little worse, like a lot worse.
Yeah, definitely.
So wouldn't it like behoove us to make sure that whatever it is that we're going to change, that we know for a fact works?
We know for a fact.
Yeah, like we know it works.
Well, yeah, I believe that's completely good.
Okay.
Also, we need for
So,
that we need a
let me-
really good
Let me ask you
education
this.
system.
Are you a socialist?
Yeah,
Like you argue for the workers to own the means of production?
yeah, I do.
And you believe that this would result in a better society?
Yeah,
Do you think that that move is a giant change to society?
Quite so.
Hmm?
Yeah, I do.
So, would it be important to know that it works?
Yeah.
Okay.
One, I always argue that
Do you think it, like, we have enough data to know it works?
I think we have enough data
Really?
to
I don't
think.
think we do at
No,
all.
I don't mean that it will work really well. That it won't cause such a problem that that it's not solvable. Like we are not
Well,
introducing fascism here.
I mean,
Everything that
but
I
I
argue,
observe, right? Like, many attempts where socialism was attempted. Some of the countries, they're not influenced by the United States. They're not stopped at all, and they didn't result in a higher quality of living standard,
a lot
right?
of capitalist countries didn't end up with the higher quality of standards,
I agree with you with that,
especially at the
but the
start.
current highest quality of living standard countries are capitalist countries with social safety nets. So we know
Why?
that works. We know for a fact that one works, but we don't know whether or not that it works for socialism. And so you
Why
said
not?
earlier that we should know for a fact whether or not it works. And do you think that we know for a
No,
fact
no.
that socialism works?
I think I wasn't saying that. Maybe I misunderstood you. I thought you were asking that we should do things we know for a fact they work.
Yeah.
Yeah, but never we don't ever like. For example, can we prove that let's say in the 19 like when we made the let's say the oh, the rights for the blacks. How do I say that?
Civil Rights Act?
Civil Rights Act. Yeah.
Okay. What
When we
about it?
made that, we weren't sure that something bad wouldn't happen. Like we didn't have any data
We're
on.
not?
Well,
No, there was lots of data for that one.
really,
Yeah.
what data would we use
But we
for
didn't,
that?
like, they outlawed, they had equal rights in European countries for a while. So, like, we could observe that there was a quality of living difference. Not only that, you had states among the North that, in comparison to the South, I mean, they lived a remarkably higher quality of living standard. So, yes, we did have data. I mean, the economics, not just like from a humanitarian standpoint, but the economics
No,
itself
not in the north.
had benefit.
Wait, the Civil Rights Act. When were they passed?
The, I think, 1964 or 1967? It's one of those.
Yeah, and they weren't about, for example, slavery.
Okay,
That
yeah.
I agree. We had pretty good data on if it works or not, and the answer was not. But
Okay.
this thing like didn't make money, didn't make living standard better. Uh, I mean, by the rights, yes, but let's say the majority of the population was white at the time.
Mhm.
Why? Like there is no, let's say, data for making such a claim that it for the whites it would have been better. The only claim we could make are, I think it will be best by these reasons. Also, we think it's ethical to do so,
Are you
and
implementing a hypothetical? Like, okay, let's say it wasn't, it ended up
hypothetical.
not being better for blacks, but it would be better.
No, no,
I'm sorry. I'm
saying
sorry. It
that,
would not be better for whites, is what you're saying.
no, it's not an hypothetical. We
Okay, you're
didn't have
saying
data
that would show, and that's not what shows.
at the time. Like,
No,
where,
even back
what
then, the
data
data
could they
showed that
apply?
whites would have benefited greatly. Any economist would tell you having more trade is a better society.
More trade.
Yes.
What do you mean?
So you
How
have
is
a
it
transaction that exists between one consenting individual to another consenting individual?
Okay.
right? They're not excluded from society. So a good example would be like they're allowed to go into a restaurant and eat,
Hmm.
right? Like that would result in more economic progress.
Yeah, but
So
at the
so wait,
time,
that would mean white businessmen, white people would directly benefit from that. This would also reduce crime because now you have people that are now economic players who can actually contribute.
um, yeah, but for example, there were a lot of racist ideas, and some of them were backed by the data of the time.
Like what?
You know, and by mostly by, let's say, really bad beliefs that were not, let's say, found in science.
Sure. But
Thing
wait,
is,
hold on. You said that they were backed by data, and then you're saying they're not founded in the science. So were
no,
they
no.
backed by data or were they not backed by data?
Uh, there was some data, but it was mostly,
Bad
let's
science,
say,
wasn't it?
used. Yeah.
That's what I
The
that
thing
because
is,
that's
we
what I've
always know.
observed, right? In the 70s
Yeah,
and the
we always
60s,
know
the data
in
didn't
retrospective.
didn't pan out to actually be correct. It had some pretty bad science and there was more science that showed, okay, this is just wrong. It's just wrong.
You're right. In America, America was pretty late on the Civil Rights Act, so there were a lot of examples.
Hmm.
I the most like the better example that I always say is democracy wasn't didn't really work well in the past, and let's say in something like the UK or let's say like
Lord of the Flies.
most of the successful countries at the time of the revolutions, the first democratic revolutions of the French Revolution, the American Revolution, most of those countries that were successful were monarchies, and
Sure.
democracy had a pretty bad record of working at the time. So in a time like this where there couldn't be any, let's say, data on if democracy is gonna work, the only data that you can cite is, let's say, small things that happened and theories about that is better, and you you can make, let's say, ethical arguments for democracy,
Okay. I mean, well,
but you can't really show it.
hold on. So would you say that like, that are computer models adequate to being able to test an economic theory?
No,
No? Why
I
not?
don't think I don't think anyone or anything can, let's say, run alone run an economy or predict an economy. It's very.
Well, not predict an economy, but run economic models to check
Do you mean
outcomes.
that?
Yeah, like we have an idea, rather than implementing said idea that could cause the death of millions of people, we try it on a computer model and see whether or not it actually pans out to doing anything.
Uh, okay, but I think it's like no. Let's say this can be done on a small scale, like maybe a city maximum, but like
Like
on states,
socialism?
it would be incredible. Like it would be impossible to test that on current technology or
Well,
any
we do
technology.
computer we do there's economics computer models all the time. We do it all the
Yeah,
time to test economic
they are
theories to
not
see if they
really.
pan out.
Yeah, test. I don't think that, like for example, all the crises of this economic system, I don't think they would have been avoided by a computer, or like since we had computers in the 2008, or in COVID, or under COVID, like it was pretty obvious that something similar to what China did, no, to what Korea or Japan did was the best. Like having masks on very early by culture, and making small or big, let's say, lockdowns depending on thing. This was, I think, at the time extremely backed by data. Like if you would run a computer simulation, I think you would, I think it would show. But I don't think we really do that, and I don't think it's really, let's say, worth doing, because I mean, it's very hard to convince people that one, on a large scale, these things actually work, because they didn't really show. Like, I wouldn't make the argument that a computer said so. Like, especially
Well,
knowing that no
do
computer
you
can
think
predict
do you think that like
a
one
large scale
step
of.
like would be try it with a computer model, see what you get? Is that a step in your mind? Because to me, that's like step one. See if you can show that it works on a computer model.
I mean, cooperatives have worked, like
Well, I'm
they
not.
exist.
Hold on, I'm not against worker co-ops.
There are a lot of socialist ideas that were implemented in countries,
I, Hold
and
on,
we can
before
look
we
at the
talk about
historical data
socialism,
to
I
see.
really want to nail you on this point, right?
Okay.
Do you think a good step is going to be applying a computer model? See if it works.
I mean, like, I don't, I don't believe that we have the, let's say, technology necessary to predict a large-scale economy. So I
Well,
don't
Google it.
think.
Can we use computer models not to predict a large scale economy, but to see whether or not a model works? Do you think that that would
Okay,
be step one?
if it's possible, then yes.
Okay. So what if I told you that it is possible? Economists do it all the time.
Well, they, especially capitalist economists, well, they didn't get one crisis. So I
Hold
really
on. But
don't.
okay, hold on. You're
No,
just
like
saying
if
you're using an ad hominem on that. You're saying they're capitalist economists, therefore they have a vested interest, therefore that they're always going to
no,
find
no, I'm
socialism
not
is
saying
wrong.
that. I'm
That
saying
would
that.
basically mean that would invalidate any falsification principle. That's a very
No, no, I'm
unscientific thing
saying
to
another
operate
thing.
on.
I'm saying another thing. I'm saying having this technology didn't allow them to foresee any of the major economic crises. Not one. They weren't stopped.
Yes, I agree with you. Economists can't predict the economy. I get that. I don't disagree with you
Okay.
there.
Then,
But at the same time, I don't. That doesn't mean, therefore, an economic model couldn't be tested. We do it all the time.
what do you mean by economic model?
To be tested? Yeah, so
No,
like we
what do
make a
you mean?
change in a particular variable and then see whether or not that leads to better outcomes that
Yeah,
we're
but
interested in.
there is a, let's say, there is an there is something called a capacity of like, if you have an let's say, an already existing economy that already works, then by changing a factor you can see what happens,
Yeah.
but
So it
it's
could either
impossible to
be better
calculate
or
an economy.
worse. Don't you think?
Yes, I agree, but it's impossible to, let's say, see if I don't know, the destruction of
So,
the stock market, what would happen
yeah,
if. It's impossible to see because
that's not
the
true.
technology is just not advanced enough,
No, we can do that. We would be able to do a model like that. Sure.
really.
Yeah.
Okay, then if they can do that, then literally every major crisis should have been avoided because we should have known.
No, because there's too many factors.
Yeah, but there is too many factors
But
on
like, you understand that like I'm asking you here
going.
about step one. What you said earlier that
Yeah, but,
that if you are going to attempt a radical change, right? You said that society could go backward. I agree with you. Society could go
Yeah,
backward if you make a giant change. And so I said, so one thing, if you're going to make sure that it doesn't go backward, is that it would be a really smart idea to test whether or not that this thing works or does not work. You're saying that these economic models are not good enough to being able to test. Very well, but this is step one. What would you do to test whether or not that it works?
do it. Do it one time on a
You would
on
want
a
to do
low-scale
it?
economy. Yes, it's the only way to
Okay,
test
but
it.
that
There is
that
no way of doing it
contradicts
otherwise.
that contradicts your first
No.
principle.
One, I cannot prove that it
Should a
will
system be
work
tested
better.
before you do it?
Well, that is the test. There is no other way of testing it.
What? So, okay, so what if, for example, you do the test and then 3 million people die? What do?
it
You
will
go,
work.
oops.
Well, I can give
I wonder
arguments
if I should have
I-
checked that better.
Yeah, but I can definitely. There are enough, let's say, proof or data or way of knowing if a thing is gonna kill 3 million people. It is, and of course, I'm not gonna try to do this on a large scale at the start. For example, let's say we want to try this, let's say, economic change in the United States. I'm not gonna start by compromising the entire economy. Well, I'm gonna start with a state. I'm gonna start.
That's
or with
millions
cities.
of people. So this
Yes.
could either go really, really well, or you can have a lot of people dying and suffering for no
Yeah,
reason.
one.
And this is, and you're going to
I can
test this on
prove-
millions of people. Would you
Yeah,
be
but
willing to
I'm
put
gonna-
your name on this paper?
Are you gonna? This is the same argument that people would make against democracy.
This
You
isn't
can
not
prove that it works.
necessarily my argument. This is by your very metrics,
making it,
your argument. I'm trying to present to
making
you.
the argument.
No, I asked you, should we test it? You said yes.
Yeah, and the only
And
way.
your smallest
testing
test that
it-
you would be willing to implement is at a state level. No matter
City.
what
That's
state
city. It's fine.
you refer
City is
to,
fine.
that is millions of people. That's still millions of
city is
people. That's hundreds of
Depending
thousands to
on the
millions
city.
of people now. That's not any better. If I saw that
Okay, so
some
let's,
economist
No, please,
wanted
please,
to
please.
make a change into a particular city and it resulted in the death of of 500,000 people, or I don't know, 500,000 people are going are going homeless in this one city, I would be like, what the fuck? How is this person not in jail? How is this person not hanging?
You're right. I believe that if.
So why would you do it at such a grand scale? Why not do a computer model?
One, like again, they don't work for a big economy. They don't. They cannot. Let's say calculate the immense amount of changes that such a say change in the economy would make. There is no way of doing it. If it existed, then it would have been already done. Because
do we do computer models for macroeconomic scales? Yes, absolutely. Computer models are widely used in macroeconomics to simulate and analyze the behavior of economics at large scales. These models can range from simple frameworks to complex systems that incorporate a multitude of variables and relationships. One common type of macroeconomic model is called the Dynamic Stochastic General Equilibrium, or DSGE model, which aims to capture the interactions between various economic factors such as consumption, investment, government policies, and technological shocks over time. time. DSGE models often incorporate stochastic elements to account for uncertainty and randomness at economic dynamics. There is also the computable general equilibrium, or CGE model, which is often used to analyze the effects or policy changes of external shocks in the overall economy. CGE models typically represent the economy as a set of equations of describing supply, demand, and market clearing conditions in different sectors. Okay, so I'm asking you. We have the models. They exist. Don't you think before we check or that we try an economic model influencing millions of people, don't you think we should check that it works? You said yes to this earlier.
I'm gonna try this once again. They don't work. They don't work on such an amount of changes. They cannot work. If they worked, then anytime a socialist tries to do the same thing that I'm trying to do, then there will be a study by economists that use these panels and say, it doesn't work. We already tried. This never happens. Like, do you really think that if America in general had a study like that, they wouldn't use it? Like, they wouldn't really say, here, material proof of this idea not working.
Well, hold on. That's fair. We can talk about that. Sure. Like maybe they're denying it. Maybe they're just like, okay, this is just a giant load of horseshit. Sure, that's possible. But don't you think that's step one? Don't you think that we should try it before we decide to do it on? I'm sorry, we should test it before we decide to try it?
The only way of testing it, to my knowledge, is trying it on a small scale. It's a city. The thing is,
that is hundreds of thousands of people. That's a terrible idea.
Please let me finish. We can prove that 3 million people are not going homeless. That thing we can do. It is easy to prove that. We cannot prove that it will make the economy better, but we can prove that 3 million are not dying. That is easy. And it's not doable by computer because it would have been already done.
But this is what I'm saying. It can be done with a computer.
Okay.
We should want to show that before we implement it on an entire city. We need to know that this stuff works before we implement it on hundreds of thousands of people.
The only argument that I can make against that is that if what you said exists, and I don't think so. And I don't think so because if we had proof of socialism not working, well, then the US would have it by now. I'm sorry if you think that the United States wouldn't have experts working on, say, the debunking of socialism. You're, I think, delusional. Like, if you
do you think that economists looked at socialism as a potentially viable theory? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. So why didn't they move to it? Well, actually, that's not true. We did move. There was a conceded push to move to it in the 1920s.
Yeah.
Right? All across the world, it was attempted. So what is the result?
In one way.
What is the result?
The result of what is called not really socialism, the way of Stalin of doing socialism, it was tried only in this way, really. It doesn't work. Completely right. But I can say the same for a lot of other capitalist experiments. For example, anarcho-capitalism doesn't work. Obviously, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Another form, let's say...
I mean, we had that through the Banana Republic. It didn't work. It doesn't work. Right? We know it doesn't work.
There's a lot of capitalist countries that made industries, but they make, let's say, they make themselves, like they don't use protectionism. Like a small country in, let's say, this era, that doesn't make protectionism, and there's a, let's say, for example, a good amount of oil, well, that country in 10, 20 years doesn't really, like, is so let's say, reliant on other countries that it's basically non-existent. This is a, let's say, form of capitalism that, well, doesn't really work. The thing is, like again, if you're gonna say Stalin vision of socialism didn't work, I completely agree. But what Stalin did, I'm not trying to do.
Well, I'm merely arguing we should know that this works before we implement it and on,
Yeah,
say,
and
an
the point
entire
that I was
city or an entire
yeah, but
like.
the point that I was making before is we couldn't, like, there was no data on democracy either. I don't believe that there is data. If there is, then
Okay,
maybe we can have
okay,
this conversation another time when I'm more.
we did have data, but again, like democracy really, like we can't operate that under the same metric because like we didn't have like the modern scientific method back then, right? So but like if I had to like say, I would say, hey, if we're going to make this giant change from a, you know, from a monarchy to a democracy, I'd be like, yeah, we do need the data, you know. And people
And
who
you
are
wouldn't have
scholar,
made it. There was no data that the
that's
economy
fair.
would
So
not
like,
collapse.
but thankfully the experiment worked, right? I'm not saying that your
Hey, then
socialism
that is
idea
the
could
same
never
thing.
ever work, but what I am saying is if you're going to make a giant change, please have the research behind you.
You
We
just
need
said
to
that
know this
democracy.
works before we
You
implement
just
it on
said
thousands of people at
yeah, but you
once.
just said that democracy didn't have the, say,
Yes, we didn't have a scientific revolution back then, but now we do. So why would we not use the tools?
wait,
What is the problem of getting the
again,
data for this? I think it's
again,
completely
there
reasonable to
is,
request data.
yeah, but there is no data on this. One,
What? That's what I'm saying. Get the data.
and I'm saying it, the only way of making of having the data is doing it. That's the only way.
Then by that
There is no
metric,
other
I
way of
can't
doing it.
trust it.
And I can trust
I have
you.
zero trust.
Fine. It's fine if you don't have trust. It's completely fine.
Yeah, but I'm not gonna. I don't. I would not want you to have control over an economy if that
Yeah,
is
and
the
I
metric
wouldn't.
you would operate at.
You wouldn't want democracy in back in the day when there was no.
Well, it probably
Your
would have been a
argument
different
doesn't make
thing. It
sense.
would be like, all right, well, what does the literature say? And the literature at the time did, in
The
fact,
literature at
argue
the
in
time
favor
was
of
not
democracies.
pro democracy.
Huh?
The literature at the time was not pro democracy by any means.
I I beg to differ, my good sir. I mean, do you think that John
What?
Locke was like a anti-democracy person?
I mean,
He's one of the most
literature.
forward thinkers of the time, don't you think?
Not they didn't think so at the time. Like a lot of things, thinker were not respected at the time. They are respected now because we agree with what they're saying. Also, again, literature. Can I, can I, let's say, like, can I revolve myself to literature on Marxism? Because if I can, if that qualifies as proof, I'm all for it.
No,
Like if
it
only
doesn't qualify as proof. But again, like the only
there
thing I
is
have to operate on at the time would have been literature, which, like, I mean, like it's definitely not proof, but it's definitely a move in the right direction. But we currently have computer models available that could
again,
potentially
don't
test
believe
a
that
socialist
works.
a socialist
I
utopia.
don't believe
So
that
let's
works.
get wait. I literally named you some models
Yeah,
that we could operate off of.
if you can literally like one. I'm really skeptical that they can, let's say, work under a different economic system. That's completely unreal. It
Well,
just,
economists do it all the time. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, it's there.
economists can disprove that socialism works.
Yeah,
Like,
it was disproven in the 20th century, but then there's still people today that still think that socialism works.
how is it disproven? Can you give me the data on that?
What?
You said it was
It
disproven.
resolves in a substantially lower quality of living standard than capitalist nations. It's not even close.
You said I'm not trying to do what Stalin did, and you're not and you as a capitalist, I believe that should disagree with what, for example, I don't know. Let me think. I don't know if you want a king deciding who gets to own the property, which was the, let's say, first type mm, of capitalism. I don't think you agree with that. It was the first. I'm not trying to do what Stalin did. I I can I
I
believe
know you're not
wholeheartedly
trying to do what Stalin did.
Stalin
I'm
did.
saying that you have removed all potential falsification here, right? You're saying it
No,
can't be
no,
tested. You have to do it. You have to actually do it. And I'm saying that could be very harmful. And indeed, even by your own metrics, that could be harmful. I'm saying it's not
no, no.
worth that
I'm
risk.
saying that
You're
making
saying it is worth that risk.
no, I'm not saying that it is worth that risk. I'm saying, yeah, I can prove that it won't do that. I can't not prove
How?
that it will. The best thing that I can do is point towards things that were done in that direction, and see that kind of worked, that kind of didn't work. That's, for example, a lot of say socialist-like reforms in capitalist countries in the say 50s or 70s worked very well. A robust, let's say, a robust welfare system worked.
Yeah, well,
Maybe
hold
we
on.
can
Those
do
things
better.
show working, right? That's why I'm in favor of them. They work.
Yeah, but the thing is,
But you
how
understand
would
that
you
like
know?
capitalism with social safety
How would you
nets
know?
versus like workers owning the means of production are two completely different things?
Yes, these things, I believe, not on, let's say, I don't believe that workers owning the means of production is, let's say, argument to be made on it is gonna improve your life in a, let's say, you're gonna have more money. That is not what I'm trying to say. The only thing that I'm trying to say while arguing for workers' democracy is more decision making to the workers, and that hopefully having them doing, making the decision about them, well, at least they won't go against their interest. Maybe it's gonna be, maybe it's gonna be worse. I cannot, let's say, marginally worse.
Well,
Or
I mean, at this point, I would say I look forward to your to you to finding something like that, right? Hopefully through an
you,
economic model that can actually observe real metrics.
there is no difference between your argument now and the argument against democracy in the time.
You're
There is
operating
no,
under the basis of a material dialectic. I reject that the same thing will happen no matter what. I reject it. I don't believe that that's the case.
you just said you do. Like,
No.
for example, you just said that since it didn't work, well, it's not gonna work.
Well, I'm saying it hasn't worked yet. And I'm saying we should
And I'm not
have
going to do that.
information that provides that shows that it works.
Like
And you're
again,
saying that we don't have that information. We can't have that information unless we try it. I'm saying that's not a risk I'm willing to take. I would rather first start by seeing some computer models.
and
Maybe then
in,
we can actually operate. Okay, maybe we could
like,
try it on a
and,
small town at that point and see if it actually has any metric of working. Okay, did it work? Let's go ahead and
a small-
increase the population. Let's make it from 2,000 people to I don't know, like 15,000 people. Does it work now? Does it have a substantial negative as soon as we raise it from 3,000 to 15,000? Like you understand? Like I'm arguing, like, hey, if you're gonna do this, make sure like not harming people is kind of my point.
yeah, we can definitely try it on a smaller scale.
So why not a
Definitely.
computer model? Why are you so
Because
averse
they
to a
don't work.
computer model?
Because they don't work.
What do you mean they don't work? They work all the time. Why do you think macroeconomists do it?
In a capitalist
No,
framework.
that's not true. You can do the framework entirely under a socialist system. It's a computer model. You can program it how you like. It's not like it's stuck on capitalism mode and you can't switch it. That doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't have the data on socialist because
What?
there is no data on social on
I'm
what
saying that
trying
you
to.
could develop like a model could be developed. It's a computer. It's not like it's a
I think you have a completely wrong understanding of this. Like completely wrong. They
Okay.
cannot, like, by your metric, every crisis would have been avoided because hey,
No,
we can make a
no,
model
it
on it.
can't predict, but you can operate models off of it.
Yeah.
Policies get
So
made on the
they
basis
cannot,
of these computer
they
models
cannot,
all the time, and they show
they cannot.
success. So it's
Yeah.
like
On a
you're
small,
saying that they don't work
on a
because we can't
smaller,
predict, but that's kind
smaller
of the thing
case
when it comes to
under.
like modern markets is that there's a lot of variables and it's complicated. But that doesn't mean you couldn't theoretically check like whether or not socialism works under a computer model. Like I just disagree with you. And by the way,
One,
right? It doesn't like let's say like the computer model shows that it doesn't work. Fine. Then we should be able to show that and then be like, okay, well, maybe if we try it in a different way that it works, or maybe if like, computer models aren't adequate, but you don't even operate on that. You're just saying it don't work. We need to try it to make sure it works. And I'm saying that's too much of a risk. We have to I have to agree to disagree with you at this point, Citra. It was nice talking to
complete.
you though.
No, no.
We got to move to the
I
next
would
person.
like. Okay, fine. Run away.
It's not really a matter of running away. I just have more like people who want to have discussions. It was good talking to you. Okay. Did he leave? Oh no.